Hello and welcome to this tutorial. So today we are going to discuss about one of the important topic in Python, that is exception handling. So if you are doing any project or if you are writing any code and if you are not able to handle the exceptions, then you cannot complete your projects. So it seems very interesting and important topic if you are doing coding in Python or in Java or in any other programming language. So let's deep dive into it. So what topics am I going to cover in this particular tutorial? Initially, I will discuss what are exceptions and what are syntax errors. Then we will discuss the introduction part of exception handling. Then we will discuss try and except block. Then we will discuss control flow, how control flow goes in case of try and except. And then we will discuss about try with multiple except. And then we will discuss one of the important else block in exception handling. Then we will discuss about finally block, and then we have some exercises. So let's come to the topic now. So if I say what are exceptions or what are syntax errors, so you might think like if any exception is going to happen, that might be a syntax error. So we need to understand initially like syntax error and exception both are different thing. So the same thing I have written here, the errors which occur because of invalid syntax are called as syntax error. So whenever we are writing any invalid syntax, we can say that is a syntax error. So if I talk about the example, so you can see here I have initialized a variable x equal to 10, and then I'm putting one condition. If x equal to 10, then I just want to print a message, yes, correct value is 10, but here colon is missing. So it seems like I did invalid syntax mistake. Okay, so if I run this code, so simply it is saying syntax error and this is invalid syntax. So the thing which we need to understand here is this syntax error is not an exception. Syntax error and exception both are different thing. So if I add a colon here, so simply it will work. So there is no syntax error now. So it is working fine. Now if it is syntax error, then what is exception? So exception is something which we also say as runtime error. So if something is runtime error, that can be a exception. So just I have written here, while executing the program, if something goes wrong because of the end user input or programming logic. So there are two different things. One is invalid syntax and second is programming logic. There is some problem in programming logic, or there can be problem in the user input. So that will lead to runtime error or exception. So let's go to the example for this uh, exception. So if I move this, so you can see here runtime error real time example. So if I check runtime error real time examples, I'm dividing 10 by 0. So it simply means we can't divide 10 by 0. So it is leading to runtime error. So if I run this, so it is saying 0 division error. So this 0 division error is somehow we can say exception. Example of exception. So if I divide 10 by 100, simply it will work. So it is giving me 0.1. Python is giving me 0.1. So it is not leading to any you can say runtime error. Okay, now let's talk about the second scenario. Here I am taking input as integer. Okay, I am giving one integer value, runtime input value to x. Okay, integer value to x. Now if I run this, it's simply asking me to enter the number, but I have already defined the number which I will enter will be of integer type. But here in this scenario, if I am putting the string value here, so it will simply lead to a value error. So it is saying invalid literal for int. Means you initially you defined like you will enter a integer value, but now you are entering a string value. Now let's change this scenario. If I'm entering here 56, that is again an integer value, so simply it will work fine. So it is taking the value of x, that is 56. So in simple terms, we can say whenever we do any invalid syntax error, that leads to syntax errors, and whenever we do any runtime error means zero division error or value error, these type of things are we can say as exceptions. So Now come to the definition of exception and exception handling. So I have written here exception handling concept applicable for runtime errors but not for syntax errors. So till here we understood like what are syntax errors and what are runtime errors. Now, so in case of exception handling, we need to understand that exception handling concept will only be applicable for runtime errors, not for syntax errors. So if you are writing any invalid syntax, so in that case I cannot use exception handling. Okay. Now what is exception? Exception is something which disturbs the normal flow. Like let's suppose I'm taking a real time scenario. I'm watching TV and suddenly my internet stops, and again if internet is going to stop, that will again stop my TV. So this is disturbing the normal flow of whatever I was doing. So this is something which I can say that is an exception. So some examples of exceptions in Python or in any other programming language, we can say zero division error, type error, value error, file not found error. So we will see this in exercises like how these things work. Okay. Now this was all about exception. Now let's discuss what is exception handling. Exception handling does not mean repairing the exception. So it is simply like, let's suppose I'm watching a TV, okay, and internet stops and my TV stops. So that seems an exception happens. So exception handling is not a way to handle that exception, but it is a way to define a alternate of that particular problem or that particular exception, so that my normal flow will go continue. So let's suppose I'm watching TV and internet stops. So I should add one more internet connection. If in case my first internet connection goes in down, so the second internet connection will continue my normal flow. So that is something I have written here one more example. For example, our programming requirement is to reading a data from remote file located at London. So one file is there which is located at London location, and at runtime the London file is not available. Then your program should not be terminated. In that case, we have to define an alternate way or an alternate file so that the normal flow of the code will continue. Okay. Now there is one note: every exception in Python is an object. For every exception type, corresponding classes are available. So as we know, in Python everything is object. So there is some object location for everything. So exception is also something where we will see like object location or object type of concept in each and every exception. So there are corresponding classes available in Python. We will go in detail. Do not worry about that. Let's come to next slide. So next slide says that Python exception hierarchy. So this says like base exception, then we have multiple type of exception, arithmetic exception. In arithmetic error, there can be zero division error, overflow error, value error. So these are nothing but different type of exceptions and their classes available in Python. Okay. Now till here we are clear with what is exception, what is exception handling, what is syntax error, and what is runtime error. So let's discuss about this try and except block. Like what is this try and what is this except block? So the code which may raise exception is called as risky code, and we have to take that risky code inside try block. So I'm saying I'm watching TV and I have two internet connections, internet 1 and internet 2. Okay, so I will put that internet 1 connection in try block. So let's suppose try with internet 1. If something bad is happening with that particular internet 1 connection, then except inside exception except block I will put that second internet connection. So if in case my first internet is going to be down, in that case my second internet connection will continue my normal flow. So we can say the handling code will be inside the except block, and the risky code which may raise a runtime error, that will be inside try block. Okay, so just come to the code part now. So I have printed one statement here, statement 1. this is the statement which may lead to error. Okay, so here you can see if I'm executing these three lines, so my happily my first line is going to be printed, statement 1, but in case of statement 2 it will lead to zero division error. Okay, if in case I change this to 10 by 100, happily my complete code is going to execute. Okay, now if in this scenario this is leading to runtime error, this statement is leading to runtime error. Now, how to handle that particular code using exception handling? So, I told you the code which is risky, which may raise error, put that particular code inside a try block. So, I have just put this risky code inside the try block, and inside the except block, I have defined a alternative thing. So in this scenario, if I run this code, so happily my statement 1 or statement 3 is going to be printed. Okay, so this is something which illustrates the try and except block, how we can use this. In our case, we are doing normal or graceful termination of code, means we are handling runtime error using except block. So just we are handling the runtime error using except block. Okay, and normal termination is going to happen, so no runtime error is going to happen because we have handled that runtime error. Okay, now let's come to try with multiple except, like how can we have multiple except error. So here in this scenario I'm taking two inputs, x and y. Okay, and I'm printing x divided by y, and uh, there can be multiple type of runtime error. So you can think of like if in runtime there might be zero division error or there might be value error. So let me run this code, then you will get basic idea like how things are going. So if in scenario I'm entering the first number as 10 and I'm entering the second number as 0, so this will obviously lead to zero division error. So it says can't divide by 0, division by 0 error. Okay, so it says can't divide by 0 and it is a 0 division error. Now let's take a second scenario. I'm putting first number as 10 and then I'm giving second number as a string value 7. Now let's see what will happen. So it says please provide int value, invalid literal for int with base 10. So it simply means like there can be multiple except with a single try. So that depends on the situation and your requirement, what you want. Okay, let's come to next scenario. Now let's come to a scenario where we will have a multiple except with conditions and we will have a default except. Let's see how it will work. Okay, so in this scenario I am taking one except block. So if I talk about this default except block, it simply means like in this scenario we were defining the error type, like if there is zero division error then go with this except block, if there is value error then go with this except block. What will happen, like if I remove these things from here, let's remove these things from here, and I'm putting one condition as except. So these were the customized except blocks, but if I remove all these things from here, I can say this is the default except block. If there is any runtime error inside try, obviously in each and every scenario my this default except is going to execute. So let me run this now. So if I am entering the 100 divide by 0, so again it is a zero division error, but it is leading to this default except and it is printing the message here. Okay, now let me remove this message from here because I have not defined the message yet. So in this scenario I am putting first value as 100 and second value as 0. So you can say it says the default except value, it is not going to value error and zero division error. So this is something which we say default except, like we are not defining, like there can be scenarios where I know this type of error runtime error can raise, but there can be scenario where I do not know, like there can be multiple situations and multiple possibilities of runtime error. So in that scenario it's better to use this default except block. Okay, let me put some other conditions like where this will raise the value error. So I'm putting the first value as 16 and then second value I'm putting as 4, that is in string format. So again it is leading to this except block always. Okay, so this is something which we say default except block. So if there is some problem or runtime error in try block, always this except default except block is going to execute. Okay, so this is the thing I have written here. You can refer this PPT from here. Okay, I will attach the link of this PPT in the description of video. Okay, now let's come to finally block. What exactly finally block is? So many of you might have problems in understanding the finally block. So it is not recommended to maintain the cleanup code inside try block, because there is no guarantee for the execution of every statement inside try block always. Okay, so let's understand this by simple scenario. What is this cleanup code, and why there is requirement to put the cleanup code inside the code? So let's think of a scenario. Let's suppose you're opening a database, and you have a big database, and you're opening that particular database, and after opening that database you are reading some data from the database, and after reading the database you are just closing the database. So this is simply a simple flow. You have opened a database, and then you are reading some tables or some data from the database, and then you are closing that particular database. So this is something which is normal. Many of us do this on daily basis. Okay, but if there is something wrong, like if there is something wrong is going to happen, like let's suppose while opening the database any exception happens, so maybe you will try it again. So every time I'm going to open my database, so let's suppose if my code is going to open the database like 30 times or 40 times, so that will create a problem on my server. So I have opened the database, but I'm not closing the database. So this is required. Like if you are opening a database, and if you are not able to do any operation, if you are not able to do any, like if you are not able to read any table from the database, it is suggested to close the database every time. Like if you are opening a database, you must close the database, either you are able to do any operation or not. Okay, so the same thing I have written here in this place. Closing database known as cleanup code. It is recommended to put this code inside finally block, because it will always execute irrespective of any dependency on try or except. So I told you the simple thing. Let's suppose 30 people work in your organization, and they all are trying to open the database, but there is some mishappening, or there is some inside risky code which is in try block, there is some runtime error. So there might be possibility they all 30 people will open the database 300 times. So there must be a statement which will close the database irrespective of this, whether they are able to open the database or not. Okay, so this is something cleanup code will work every time. So let's come to the coding part of this particular thing. Okay, so let's suppose I'm putting this as finally. Okay, finally. So this finally will say I will be executed in each and every condition. Okay, this I'm putting this. So finally we'll say like it doesn't matter whether you are going to execute the try block or except block, I am going to execute every time. Okay, so let's do a normal termination where I am entering the first number as 10 and I'm entering the second number as 5. So this is normal termination. Except block is not going to execute here. We will check here. Okay, so it says the output is 2. So these three statements are going to execute, and it is giving me 2, print x divided by y, and finally block is going to execute here irrespective of this. Except block is not going to execute. Let's come to the except block now. I'm running the same again. I'm putting 10 and then I'm putting 0. So 0 division error will happen. So in this scenario, try will not execute completely, and because of this exception it will come to except block, but irrespective of this also finally will execute it. Okay, you can check here, it says can't divide by 0. So here exception happens Because of this exception, this my code come into except block, and this executed, this has giving me a exception message like can't divide by 0. But in this scenario also, this finally block is going to be executed. So I have given you a real-time example why finally is required, and I have shown you the coding part also, like how this will work. So finally will be executed every time irrespective of try and except. Okay, let's move on now. So this is the situation, like what will happen in case of exception, in case of like if there is exception at statement 2, or if there is any exception at statement number 4. So you can refer this PPT. Okay, now we have completed try block, we have completed except block, we have completed finally block. Now there is something new which comes into picture in case of exception handling, that is else block. Now why this else block? Okay, so let's understand like why this else block is required now. Else block will be executed only if there are no exceptions inside try block. So we need to keep in mind, if there is no runtime error inside the try block, then only this else block will execute. Now you might ask like why this else block is required now. So in some situations you might want to run a certain block of code, like if your code is running without any exception. So let's suppose you have written 3 statements inside try block, and if those 3 statements are not raising any exception, in that scenario you just want to execute some special blocks of statement. So in that case, like, so if I ask a question, is it possible to execute except and else both? Never. So if in case try is executing without any runtime error, in that case only else will execute. So okay, so let's come to the real time scenario now. So let's suppose I'm opening a file. Okay, I am opening a text file in read mode. Okay, and if it is going to open successfully without any exception, then only this else block will execute. Like it will say file opened successfully, the content of file, and it will print some content of file. Okay, so let's suppose in this scenario, if there is some exception inside try block, like file is not getting opened, what will happen in that scenario? So simply it will come to except block, it will not execute the else block. Okay, so if in try block no exception occurred and file opened successfully, then only else block will be executed. If there is any error occurred in try, else will not be executed. So you need to understand, else has a friendship with try, but finally has friendship with everyone. So finally is also always going to execute. But in else will only execute when there is no exception inside try block. Okay, thank you so much. You can refer this PPT from Google Drive link. Thank you so much. Bye bye.